Hello and welcome to another episode of Tory Talks. I'm Sam. This is
Hello, everyone. I'm Ian. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. No chocolate yet today. It's quite strange doing this on Easter Sunday. Is it Easter Sunday? Is it actually Sunday?
Yes,
Is it really a day?
The date of recording is the 12th, but yes, apparently it is Sunday.
It's strange. It's strange because I'm still working at the moment. I'm still going to work every day. So I haven't perhaps experienced some of the things that some people in lockdown have, but because we're halfway through this long bank holiday weekend, I'm only into day 3, and I've already lost track of what day it is, what I'm supposed to be doing, what shops are open or not open, and there's no chocolate in the house. I haven't got to go around to my mum's for some crazy Easter egg hunt, which is always a little bit of an advantage.
Well, I've got to be honest, it's definitely because I've been at home for a month now, haven't I? I went for my one walk on Monday and I saw the bin men and I thought, it's Thursday, and so I ran home to then put my bin out and then realised that they must have been there for, picking up a missed bin or whatever. But it really got to me and I thought, how have I missed so many days? I thought it was Monday, and it was Monday.
But Sam, aren't you known for your domestic bloopers? Wouldn't you? Isn't that quite an honest mistake that you all often make? Oh, damn, is it Wednesday or is it Wednesday, Thursday? What day do I put the bins out? That's you all over.
Yeah, I mean,
Virus or no virus?
Yeah, if my son didn't tell me what day of the week it was, I probably wouldn't know anyway. And to be fair, my next door neighbour does put my bin out, so I'm not sure why I even ran home. But yeah, it's definitely all moulding into one now, isn't it?
Yeah, it does seem to be. I mean, luckily, I've only got to last till Monday evening because then I'm back at work on Tuesday. So, and then once you're back at work, obviously everything just appears to be normal. It's the evenings that are the different. But then Monday to Friday, it was only council stuff that took up my time anyway. So, this weekend has definitely been the thing that's really brought it home to me. And like I've said to quite a few people, I actually feel a little bit guilty because I'm still leading what would be a relatively normal life through this, as relative as my life, as normal as my life ever really can be. But yeah, it's and also I've come up with a new policy now. I've stopped watching the press conferences and I've stopped watching the news. Stopped watching the press conferences. I had to have gone into just not listening to the journalists' questions, which I can see on Twitter every day winds you up. So now I just don't bother watching it or anything.
Yeah, but you missed yesterday, Lad Bible.
So believe me.
Lad Bible.
Yeah, but I think what this shows is, this is a slight change in the way politics is happening anyway. We know that Boris's government likes to do things a little bit differently. And why shouldn't Lad Bible get on there when you consider that it has a reach of over 2 million people on the internet and most people get their news off the internet? And I have seen a lot of people said is that it's the young that need a lot of more encouragement on social distancing. So having an organisation like Lad Bible there seems perfectly normal to me. I think it's a lot of the squiffy, up-your-nose journalists that think it should just be them that continue to ask these stupid questions. They're the ones that seem to be getting a bit snobbish about it. But I'd say, why not have more of that?
Yeah, I mean, he asked, I can't even remember for the life of me what the question was now, but he asked a really good question. He was very respectful as well. I like Channel 4. You obviously didn't watch it, but the reporter on Channel 4 was absolutely disgraceful to Priti Patel with his tone, and he was just pushing, will you personally apologise because you're a murderer, basically, and just never ending. And I thought, nobody's taken that tone with anyone else, but because it's Priti, of course they're going to be on the attack. And he had a brilliant chair. So I tweeted that he had a brilliant chair and he replied.
I've seen his reply to you, yeah.
Yeah, I love that chair. But I thought, it wasn't the typical in front of a bookshelf.
It's not like you, Sam, to become a fangirl.
No, I was just, but then I read his bio and where he's been an editor for, and I thought, no, actually, you're not my cup of tea. But, you know, I thought his line of questioning was good, and it added a bit of variety because everything is Groundhog Day now. And so when you hear, you know, you're watching it and you can anticipate the questions, it's the same questions by the same people, and then you see someone new and it's like, oh, who are you? You know, it piqued my interest. But I do watch it. I don't watch any other TV right now, live TV, but I do watch the 5 o'clock damage report, and that is it.
Do you call it a damage report, or is that what it's actually called?
No, I call it the damage report. Yeah.
Well, it's strange because they start leaking the numbers from about 2 o'clock onwards. And quite often the numbers that they leak don't bear much resemblance to the numbers that then actually gets spoken about in the 5 o'clock press conference. That's because when they leak numbers, they're all the constituent parts of the UK, and then by the time they get to the 5 o'clock, they put them all together. They've added a few bits and pieces from somewhere else. But you know, people like Lad Bible are more likely to ask the questions that actually people want to hear, rather than questions that journalists think people want to hear. It's amazing me really that, you know, since the Brexit referendum, most political journalists have been so out of touch with what the public really want, which is why you get results like the Brexit referendum and Boris winning an 80-seat majority. Then they still haven't got it that actually, I mean, the thing about most journalists is they are quite active on social media, so they must see the reaction to their questions on social media, but not one of them has changed their tone or their tactics since then, even though they're not getting the answers that they want, and they're not goading them enough into a... So it doesn't make sense to me why they're still asking such strange, pointed questions, which are just designed to cause mischief. And I was trying to look... So I haven't been watching a lot of lot of it on the news, so I have been looking at it on the internet, and I've been trying to see the reaction in other countries to see how their media. Now I know our media is different from a lot of medias, but there's a tabloid media in every country, even in Germany, even though their media is different to ours, and it's quite illuminating. They're very much so. The media in France is against Macron and the government, but then to be fair, the media in France, Macron and his government had a lot of problems without the coronavirus anyway.
Yeah.
We do seem to be the only one, which isn't really, I'm glad we're social distancing, which isn't really surprising because we've all known this anyway, but we do seem to be one of the only ones where it's such an attack line on the government. I think you're getting that in the US, but then the US is like that anyway. It's very partisan, the US, you know, and they take out adverts to slag off the other side, and they spend millions to do it.
Yeah.
And let's face it, they have got a presidential election coming up in a few months. But it's been surprising that there's been a lot of public anger towards the journalism during this crisis, and not one journalist has seemed to change. And I think this does actually... rightly or wrongly, this does. Do you know what? I think this could signal a lot of changes in the way political journalism is done, and it's a shame because I actually watched the Brexit Cast, which is the podcast that they do on BBC One. Laura Koonsberg does it, and those two other journalists.
Yeah, I watched that.
They started off doing Brexit Cast, which was actually quite good. Mm-hmm. Now, it's strange because it's really interesting. It's the same journalists, but just they're talking together, and they have some really intelligent conversation on this. And it's only, I think it's about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, but it's worth watching, and it's not the rubbish that they churn out during these press conferences. So I do wonder if it's a specific line they're being asked to do at these press conferences, because it certainly isn't what they're like when they do the Brexit cast, when they do the podcast about it. So or Corona cast, whatever it is they call. So it is strange, but I'm definitely trying to steer away from it. And plus, I know that I get my daily WhatsApp message from you with just a 3-figure number that just says this many are dead. And it's like, oh, I know I'm going to get that. So what's the point? You always send it to me about 2 minutes after it's come out as well. So what is the point of looking myself?
You make me sound like I just bombard you with all this stuff. But it's like, I'm just sharing the knowledge. I know you're a busy guy. So, I give you the details. Well, I think yesterday I gave you the figure and I said, Priti Patel. And then normally followed
So
up by a message that the media are trash.
did Priti Patel do this news conference yesterday just because everybody's been asking where she is?
No, I don't think she has. The subject matter was obviously policing, but she's raising. I think what they're getting to the point now is, well, how I see it is that they're raising all these other points now. And she spoke about, domestic violence. She spoke about children at risk. They're more at risk now for grooming and paedophilia. And this is all the stuff that I'd been speaking to people personally about when people were demanding that the schools went on lockdown. Okay, well, there are some looked after children who have an extra level of protection if they go into children's centres, if they go to schools. They don't have that layer of protection. They are probably in that environment now, closed off from the rest of the world, who can keep an eye on them. And so Priti's role yesterday was kind of saying, look, we're putting more funding in the domestic abuse. This is the stuff that we've been working on. And she was even asked, like, where have you been the last three weeks? And her reply was a long-winded one, but it was doing my job. There's no reason why, when she's working behind the scenes at a really, really difficult time to access people, why should she be there? So, that was her. I think that will be her one and only, possibly. But she raised really good points, and it was probably time for her to do it. I don't think it was caving into media pressure at all. It's just they seem to be doing different things. They're doing the economy. We might even see Therese soon talk about work and pensions. But it's getting to that point where it's so repetitive. They have to start letting us know what the other groundwork is.
Well, I think as well, the part of it, forget putting the timing to one side, is that because there are so many repetitive questions coming out, I think, and perhaps some negative reaction to their tactics. I think that it is quite important to explain to the general public, perhaps, some of the right way to explain it. Some of the questions that would have come up when they were discussing lockdown. Some of the things that actually, when somebody says them out loud, like Priti Patel did yesterday, the rest of the population go, "Oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Oh wow, Jesus, yeah, I hadn't thought about that." And I think it's very easy just to say, "Oh look, we should just do a lockdown," and you forget about everything else. But you have to remember, and I know it's very easy to say you can't put the economy above jobs. The economy above health and people's lives, which you can't. But you have to remember that when there's a horrendously bad economic depression, like there was in the 20s and 30s, that costs lives. That is killing people. Put aside the coronavirus, if the government, through its economic strategy, brought the country into depression at a different time, and thousands of people died, took their own lives, or whatever, through a combination of suicide, poverty, then the government would probably rightly be absolutely taken to the mill about it. So it is important that you weigh up what would happen if you don't have a lockdown, or what would happen if you have an extended lockdown. And it's no different if and I've seen the figure of 150,000 deaths that are I don't know where that number comes from, but deaths caused by an economic depression are no better, no worse, worth no more or no less than deaths caused by a virus. And they're difficult things to speak to people about, but they're the kind of things that the public need to realise. If the media are going to be so relentless on attacking the government, then perhaps they need to realise some of the difficult decisions that the government has had to make and has to make, and some of the things it has to take into consideration. Because if you remember, there was a lot of talk before the lockdown that our society and our culture wouldn't actually stomach a long lockdown. We're already seeing there's mass, and things like this don't get reported, but there's horrendously bad mass anti-reaction to this in Italy at the moment, especially in areas that aren't some of the worst affected, because Italy's a lot different to us in as much as most of its coronavirus issues have been surrounded certain regions, and there are other regions of Italy that are hardly touched, but still suffer the same lockdown. Now, all the commentators before this said that we wouldn't be able to have a long lockdown. It won't last for long. So we have to be very pointed when we had it. We couldn't have had it any earlier because it looks like now that this peak may last a few weeks. Hopefully it is the peak. And that means, you have to be realistic and say how long will a lockdown's only worth it if it's going to be viable and it's going to be kept up.
Yeah.
So I do, but again, that's why I've been steering myself away, because I've got faith that the scientists are giving the government the right information, and that the government is then using that and choosing what path to take. And I think my time is better served at the moment in helping in the community, and the time for asking questions on this. And this is what I don't get, you see. Regardless of what the government decides, this is a war footing situation. We all need to be behind the government now.
Yeah.
And, if and when it goes right, brilliant. If and when it goes wrong, that'll be horrendously bad. But the time to ask questions is then. The time now isn't to ask questions now. And as much as Keir Starmer really trying hard to pretend that he's promoting a united front, you can't say that you're going to promote a united front on one point and then have an interview with The Guardian where you're slagging off the government's handling of the PPE on another, because it's just counterproductive, and it's just terribly counterproductive.
Well, he's shown his cards really early, I think, because obviously, which is our first sort of subject that we're going to talk about, is the shadow cabinet has been announced. And I think, I wasn't sure how he would play this as soon as he became leader. We obviously knew he was going to become leader quite early doors, because they can't change their habits. And of course, they were going to select someone from the establishment that they're so anti. But I'm very surprised how early he showed his cards. If you look at the people that selected, it's very Remain heavy. He's already bringing up Brexit and things like that, and he's not going to rule out possibly pushing for us to not leave at all. So he's come out in the middle of a crisis with this strategy as such, and it's really, really obvious. And then he's already starting to slate the government. So I thought he would keep his head down for a bit, and maybe do a temporary shadow cabinet that didn't look so obvious, and then do a bit of a reshuffle later. But he's gone straight in with the Remain, and the people he selected, which we'll discuss, I was a little bit shocked by, but now I'm thinking there's not much to choose from, and so that's why he's gone the route he's gone down.
Well, disagreement alert. I think that had he just been elected to be leader of Labour and Labour were in power, then I agree with you. Chances are you settle in with the cabinet you've got and then you make some changes afterwards. I can't see with a shadow cabinet, especially during this crisis when actually, there's not much focus on a lot of things outside of coronavirus. You would never go into you'd never start your job as the leader of the opposition and keep people that you so vehemently disagree with, and keep people in key positions that are from a part of the party that you're trying to extinguish. So personalities wise, that's what every leader will do with his shadow cabinet. You hit on it right at the end. It's difficult to say there's not too much talent to choose from, because the difficulty is that Labour have been in opposition for 10 years. And I liken this very similar to when perhaps William Hague was leader, or Ian Duncan Smith. If you're away from the top table for 10 years, you have, you lose most of your recognisable politicians. If you were to see pictures of names of all 168 Labour MPs, you probably won't know of or heard of quite a few of them. But that's because you don't get much opportunity to shine when you're on the opposition benches. And then when you consider that the party's been run by the loony branch of the party for the last 4 years, and that most of the people that you and I would consider to be sane, rational politicians that would probably appear to be quite good in the media have been sidelined. So people now think of Labour and they think of the likes of Diane Abbott, Dawn Brent, Rebecca Long Bailey, people like that. You know, Dawn Brent, if anybody could tell me, you know, she sat next to Corbyn nodding her head for about 3.5 years, but I don't know if anybody can actually tell me that anything that she ever did during that time, apart from nod her head in agreement with Jeremy Corbyn. So I feel a bit sorry for Keir Starmer. He's probably got, looking through this list, he's probably got some quite good talent there, but we just don't know it's talent because we don't know them. I mean, what's his? I look on a computer, look, Nick Thomas Simons is the Shadow Home Secretary. Now,
yeah, see, I wasn't that familiar with him.
Familiar? Well, were you? Are you being polite there? You weren't that familiar with him. Had you ever even heard of him before?
Well, he rings a bell, and so I looked at his, because I'm obviously really bad with names. It's my biggest weakness is names. But I looked at his picture and I thought I do recognise him. But yeah, I couldn't tell you. So other than I believe he's a Remainer. But other than that,
he's been in Diane Abbott's Home Secretary team for years. And if you look at his background, he's a barrister. He's obviously done some good work. He's obviously a reasonably intelligent guy. He could be very, very good, but you just don't hear of him. You see, there's been no. The Corbyn way is to only promote people from a certain branch of the party. So there could be some real good talent here that actually has been quashed for the last few years. I maybe don't think that's the truth, but you know, for somebody like that to be given one of the big jobs, which the majority of the population will have never have heard of, I think highlights the problem he's got. You hit about Remainers. Now, it's a big thing. So, of the 31 people listed on the BBC news channel as being members of the shadow cabinet, even though there's a lot more of those junior ministers and stuff, they're all Remainers. But if Labour have 168 MPs, how many do you think voted leave? Hardly any. You'd be hard pushed to, you know, think back to the days when votes were on a knife edge in Parliament about Brexit. It seems such a long time ago now, where we used to sit glued to the TV to see if the government's going to win by 5 or lose by 1 or whatever.
Well, I was.
There were maybe 3 or 4 Labour MPs that voted with the government. Yeah. Then and this was before the last election, and most of those stood down, people like Kate Hoey and people like that. So there aren't many Labour, which is their big problem. You know, their seats are in areas and their targets are in areas where they have huge, massive Leave majorities, but you wouldn't be able to fill a conference table with Labour MPs that actually voted Leave in the Brexit referendum.
I mean, there are a couple of ones that I do actually like, to be honest. I'm going to start with positivity here. Valerie Vaz, she's still going to be the shadow leader of the House. I actually enjoy her exchanges, the exchanges between her and Jacob. So I quite like her in that role. I think she's a little bit punchy at times, but she's quite respectful as well. And I think that's what I like to see in politics. So I'm glad that she's still shadow leader of the House. And also one woman that I had my eye on since the leadership campaign is that Dr. Rosina Allen Khan. So she's mental health. I really like her. I thought she would be straight into health, but she's a shadow of mental health, and I think she's really, really good. She's gone back to the front line, hasn't she, for Corona, and she just seems to be a really personable figure as such. So I quite like her. I do follow her on Twitter actually, and look at her policies, and she doesn't seem to be that, you know, controversial, gobby Jess Phillips or anything like that. She just seems to be quite level-headed. I don't necessarily agree with her politics, but I can see where she's coming from with something. So I think she's one to watch for definitely the future, because she'll probably change, but I think it's a good role to put her in mental health, because she seems to be one of those people that have got compassion. She's obviously a doctor. I think she's a good egg, actually, possibly in the wrong party, but I think she's a good egg, and I'm happy to see her there.
I actually don't think it's a bad team, and I'm quite surprised. I'm quite glad to see someone like Ed Miliband back. And I
I
think,
love it.
but I think this shows, and people forget about what your personal opinions of Ed Miliband. Here's somebody who, has got experience of being in government, has got experience of leading their party, and for him to have not been on the scene for the last few years just shows what kind of state they've got themselves into. Personally, I don't agree with his politics. I don't agree with most of these people's politics, but he knows his stuff. He knows what he's talking about, but he's got this air of the public know him. And this is the problem. When you've been in opposition for so long and the people don't know you, it's very difficult for the public to relate to them. Now, there'll be a lot of Labour people now that can really relate to Ed Miliband. And if you look at the names of some of the more junior people, now this is quite illuminating. I do wonder, you said earlier that you were quite surprised that he's gone for such a change so quickly. I actually think this is a two-step process, because there's quite a lot of names in the junior shadow ministers, which are some of the bigger names in the Labour Party, but I believe that they might end up more in his shadow front bench, as it were. Names like Pat McFadden, Wes Streeting, Jess Phillips, Liz Kendall, Lucy Powell, they're all names of people that wouldn't have been touched under Corbyn. Names of quite sensible politicians. I know Jess Phillips, I'm not too sure I should put her in that box of sensible, but she is. And I know she's got a strange way about her. But from this, Pat McFadden, Wes Streeting, both been sacked by Corbyn. Corbyn's big leadership contender. Lucy Powell was before Corbyn was probably considered to be a reasonable rising star in this. And to be honest, I think that they've been away from frontline Labour politics for quite a while. And I think maybe he thought it was too much of a push to completely bring that group back. But I think that group highlights to me that, that group is more probably centrists than most Labour people are. So I think that highlights more to me the way he's going. I think he's left people in place on the top table that he perhaps wouldn't have left in place, one of those being Rebecca Long-Bailey.
Well, this is what I'm thinking, Jess Phillips is an interesting one. So when I first saw it, and especially with the fact that it was domestic violence and safeguarding, I thought this is a really, really bad call. She does a lot for the cause in terms of her campaigning, but her general way that she conducts herself isn't someone that I would think would be suitable for domestic violence and safeguarding, because you can't keep your own emotions and temper in check. And the stuff that she says is extremely clumsy. And I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Jess Phillips, because I kind of get it, because we're probably quite similar, very passionate women. And I can let my emotions take over sometimes because she feels so passionate about it. Yeah, and so, quelle surprise, everyone. I am a bit of an emotional wreck at times. But, so I kind of get it with her of why she acts like this. I just don't know whether she's the right representative of it, if that makes sense. However, then I did think afterwards, I think this is testing the water for her. Let's give her something like this, see whether she's going to step up, maybe change her behaviour, or it's enough to make her look at herself and make some improvements ready to then move forward again.
You want to say about Jess Phillips? Total agreement. She's got a loud mouth, which isn't quite potty trained yet. She's rough as old boots.
All right, calm down.
She is, but she's exact. But you know what she's got? She's got the exact thing which a lot of Labour MPs used to have, and you see a dearth of it in the party. She's got a massive connection with the general public.
Yeah.
The general public and those that vote Labour absolutely think she's wonderful. A lot on the it's strange when a lot on the Corbyn left don't like her as well, because perhaps her policies aren't that. But she's somebody that's. I'd have her in my team simply because, I think, honestly, I think sometimes she's as mad as a box of frogs. But I'd have her in my team because it's easier to control somebody when you've got them in the team. Give her a job, give her something to be responsible for, which has got bags of experience in. Let's face it, this is something that she spent her career doing before getting into politics. She is somebody that knows about real life, and there's a dearth of those on the Labour shadow team. If you had a look through, if you look at the Wikipedia pages of the Labour shadow team, a huge majority, I didn't bother working out the percentage, but it's going to be over 60, 70% have never had a job outside politics.
Well, you can say that
outside politics or with a crango or with some kind of charity.
Yeah.
There's a dearth of people with real life experience. And Jess Phillips, whether you agree with her or not, has got gritty real life experience and appeals in areas of the country where they lost seats to us in the last election. So I think she could be the biggest gift to us, but she could also be the biggest gift to them. And I can actually see her being a future leader.
Yeah, me too.
Even though she'd have to, the sun and the moon would have to align in a strange way, and lots of cards would have to be dealt strange for that to happen. But I can see it because she does resonate with the part of the party that they need to get back, which is why I'm surprised they've got Starmer as leader in the first place. It's like, thank you very much.
Well, yeah, exactly. So yeah, she's an interesting one. We have to talk about David Lammy. Justice.
Well, I must admit, right, when Keir Starmer first started announcing his shadow cabinet, sensible, yeah,
Ed Miliband, chip,
and it all seemed to be a bit boring, a bit samey, a bit predictable. And then he comes out the day later, because I think it was 24 hours later, with all his, he pulled his rabbits out of the bag, as it were, and with David Lammy, Naz Shah, Jess Phillips, he was saving all the big ones for the second. And I said, do I understand the David Lammy part? He's somebody to me that I don't think he strikes at the heart of many Labour voters. I think he struck at the heart. I think he did well with a lot of Corbynites, even though he's not overly left-wing. But his brand of shouty identity politics, I don't think is really what they're looking for. And he is, without a shadow of a doubt, the strangest choice that I've seen Keir Starmer make.
Yeah, I just didn't get it. Because like you say, it came out the following day, and I think it was, bang, bang, bang with all these. I mean, we'll talk about Naz Shah afterwards, but David Lammy, I just don't know what his actual politics is. I don't know whether he's more of the centre Blairite type that I think Keir is, or whether he's the really, really far left Corbynist. I just never know where he is, apart from he's always talking about identity politics.
Yeah, he's not from the Corbyn side of the party, else he would have been on Corbyn's top table, wouldn't he? He is more centrist than Corbyn is, and actually he's another one. This very well might be one of the actual. I think what this smacks of is another one of Keir Starmer trying to bring people that he thinks might be a bit of a firebrand into trying to give them a stake in the game, as it were. Give David Lammy a stake in the game, and you might be able to control him that little bit more. And you might actually be able to get something out of these people rather than just letting them run loose and be a firebrand. It's much easier to control somebody from within. But it's like, I just can't understand when he was sitting down and thinking what to do. And he was thinking, I tell you what, we've got this justice job. I need to give it to somebody. Why not give the Conservatives and all Conservative activists a brilliant chance to replay that stupid video where he's...
Which is the first thing I did.
Yeah, I know. Where he's, I haven't seen a policeman around here for years, and turn around, there's a policeman in the background. I mean, this is like comedy gold. I cannot believe he did it. He might as well. He should have just given him a job. If you want to bring him into the fold, bring him into the fold. But you're almost setting him up for permanent ridicule by giving him that particular job. Or was that his? Was that his mantra for doing it? His reason for doing it? Oh, because he's going to get the piss ripped out of him because of that stupid thing he said. But again, just remember as well that That's quite strange because we're going to concentrate, well, not concentrate, but the last three people that we've spoken about, Naz Shah, David Lammy, Jess Phillips, these are all minor. They've been given minor jobs in the shadow cabinet, yet we're the ones talking about them.
Justice isn't necessarily minor. I mean, the Naz Shah thing, I think, is an absolute insult to everyone in the UK, and how she can be given community cohesion. I thought the David Lammy thing was funny. I thought actually there's nothing going on in the world right now. It gave me a giggle, bit of a boost. I got on with my day, thinking, ha ha ha, I've put out a funny video. Then I saw Naz Shah and I was full of rage, actually, with how disrespectful her post is. I cannot stand this woman, and I think for anyone who could even consider her to be even in the party, she should have been kicked out with her anti-Semitism.
Okay.
And I'm not part of the cancel culture, but I just
no.
It is so disrespectful to so many communities right now because she's only focused on one community. That's not cohesion.
Sam, this isn't usually me, okay, but I'm gonna I'm not gonna stick up for her, that's for sure. But how much do you know about Naz Shah, facts wise, other than this post? What do you know about her? And what do you know about this? And what do you know about this post?
So I know, right? No, because I'm not talking about for the sake of diversity, because I know it was a retweet. I'm talking about even down to when the emergency bill was being put through to give us some extra powers to deal with this crisis. She put in I can't remember what the term is now, like an amendment to it. What is the term? Because of one specific community and their faith. Now, it wasn't about faith as a whole. It's very difficult. I'm a person of faith myself. I have to live stream my mass. It is Easter. It's quite a difficult time for people in my community as Catholics. But this was just one particular community. Now, if you're someone that's in charge of community cohesion and you're genuinely concerned by people of faith, it should be all faiths. And this is my biggest bugbear when it comes to politicians using this thing. And we saw it with Sandy Martin, with coming out and talking to community leaders. And then we had the Easter bombings last year. They didn't speak to a single Christian. He didn't speak to a single Christian community leader when we had bombings happen during our religious time, Easter. And so even that was just one particular community because that's all she's interested in. And I don't think that is community cohesion. It's just further evidence. That bill was for one particular community, not all.
Okay, see, I agree. But this is why we're not in the Labour Party and why we're in the Conservative Party. I mean, it is why. I feel a bit for Naz Shah, really, to be honest. Naz Shah has been kicked out of the party before. I'm not too sure if you knew that. Naz Shah has been kicked out of the party for anti-Semitism.
Yeah, well, I brought that up before as well. Anti-Semitism. Yeah. I think it was in 2016.
So Naz Shah was kicked out of the party for anti-Semitism. She shared a lot of stuff on social media, basically saying that Israel should be moved into America, and America would start having to fund them. Bloody, that was a lot of nonsense. She was kicked out. She was reinstated. She did this retweet about the girls in Rotherham, which completely backfired on her. Obviously, she did take it down afterwards, but I think the majority of the world and the majority of the people who are involved in politics probably think that she said those words rather than actually she retweeted them. It doesn't make it any better that she's retweeted them, but they're not actually her words. Take away those two things, and she's done amazing work in the community. Okay, but in the communities,
all communities.
She's done a lot of work for community cohesion in and around Leeds, Bradford. Bear in mind, it's very difficult for us to understand as such because we don't live in areas where perhaps the majority of people aren't white. So when we talk about community, obviously the majority of people in our community aren't the people she's reaching out to, but the constituency she represents and the area she represents, the vast majority of her community are from minority backgrounds. You won't very often hear this. This usually roles reverse. You saying this stuff.
Yeah. I'm feeling like what on earth has happened here?
She's toxic. Again, she's toxic. Doesn't make any sense why he's brought. Now, undoubtedly, she must have a lot of skills to have risen from where she was. Because if you're going, look at her past, from risen where she was. I don't know if you know, her mother got sentenced to 7 years in jail. Her father used to beat her mother senseless. And her mother killed her. I believe killed. I don't know if it was her father or somebody that was a stepfather, something like that. She killed him. She, and this was in Pakistan, I believe. She got moved to Pakistan for years to keep her away from her abusive father. She's and she came back to this country. She's had quite a rise now. Undoubtedly, to get that, she's obviously had to do some great work. She's somebody that has opened her mouth a couple of times and real properly put her foot in it. But that's just my opinion. It's because she's a common, normal person. Somebody that shoots from the hip. I do it sometimes. I open my mouth, I say something, and then 5 minutes later, you're on the phone saying you're going to get in trouble for that, or that's wrong. And I agree. But the only thing I don't understand, now she'll appeal to a lot of. Just let's not forget that Labour have to appeal to that. To lots of different communities, and she will appeal to those. But I just do not understand. Again, there's got to be a reason why he decided to bring her into the front bench or to the shadow team, knowing full well that people like you and me and everybody else on the right of politics or who are conservatives are going to have a field day. Absolutely. Especially the link with Keir Starmer, because I believe Keir Starmer was the Director of Public Prosecutions during the child sex grooming scandals that we had, and was also one of these people that was saying that people shouldn't be prosecuted. No, we shouldn't bring those prosecutions. So actually, it almost looks like a conspiracy. They've almost played into our hands by saying, right, Keir Starmer, who some people say didn't do anything to help the victims in the sex grooming scandals, and Naz Shah, who also didn't do anything to help, are almost like a team. So it's like, again,
and then add in a little bit of anti-Semitism into it, and it's like you don't even care. That symbolised you don't even care about the specific community, especially a Jewish community, who you've alienated. This was an opportunity to come back to the centre as such and to try and undo all the damage that was done in the last 10 years. How can you have someone from the off who has been suspended from the party for anti-Semitism, who has got this reputation, because it's always going to be there, and then how can you then attack us for things that Boris said as a journalist? It's bonkers to me, absolutely.
Yeah, but just remember, you can't change it overnight. I mean, 500,000 members they've got, of which quite a few thousand, in the tens of thousands, maybe even in the hundreds of thousands, are from the proper left of politics. Okay, and when you're polling as low as what Labour have been, you can't just hemorrhage a massive group of your membership base because you disagree with them on a couple of issues. You've got to do that over a few years. So that's one of the reasons why some of these people are still involved. It is with the Labour, it's a totally different machine to what we're used to. It's just look at the way that they do their leadership election with different groups voting. Unions, unions, and then the association parties and the NEC. Starmer taken over the NEC is the thing that's probably going to be. But you can't. He's had to do that first, and then he can start bringing in more things. So I actually think that a lot of this shadow cabinet may change again in about 6 months' time. I think you'll see some of the likes of some of the names we've already spoken about disappearing. Which one of the names that will disappear, and I must admit this, although this is only a small thing, this actually gave me one of the biggest cheers because I just can't stand the woman. Tracy Brabin, isn't she the one that used to be in Coronation Street? The one that there was a lot of scandal about a dress recently, where she
yeah,
wore an off-the-shoulder dress. Well,
yeah,
she was the shadow culture secretary, wasn't she?
yeah.
So she was in the top team, shadow culture secretary, shadowing a secretary of state. And he has, so rather than demoting her out of the shadow cabinet, do you know what he's done? So instead of being the shadow culture secretary, she's now a shadow junior culture minister. So that's almost like saying, so it's almost like saying you used to be the boss of that department, but now you're going to be number 3. And it's like, that's probably really rubbing her nose in it, because
Yeah,
some
I've
people
seen her
get
be
sacked.
sacked. Yeah, I've
Some
seen.
people get sacked, some people get moved. But this is kind of like, you were doing the job up there. I'm not going to give you this one. I'm going to give you this one, and you're going to say yes. And she has said yes, and I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. So that actually gave me the biggest smile, because I didn't like that one when she was in Coronation Street. I like her even less now she's in the Labour Party. So so yeah, actually for a few months you weren't allowed to say anything against her in case you got accused of because it was to do with that off-the-shoulder dress, which, to be fair, she should never have worn in Parliament.
No,
But she was, but she was on the way to something else, and good on her for wearing it, because I don't want to get even involved in that one. But yeah, that did give me the best smile of it. But we've gone through all of this, and we probably haven't spoken about the 2 people that, apart from Keir Starmer, really are number 2 and number 3.
well, Angela, are you talking about Rayner? She wasn't his choice, was she?
Angela Rayner to you, please.
Rayner, good old girl, Rayner. No, but she's not. She's not through choice, is she? She's elected. She's not selected by the members as well as Keir, isn't she? So
Well, she's still number 2.
yeah, but yeah. So yeah, the reason I'd missed her out is because it was out of his control.
Yes, I don't necessarily think it was completely out of his control, because she didn't make. So she's the deputy leader. I don't actually think he has to then make her the shadow first secretary of state, and I don't actually think he has to then announce that she's going to stand in for him at Prime Minister's questions. Oh, that's going to be brilliant. When he's not there. So I think certainly there's a couple of things that he's given her extra that he didn't have to give her. I mean, this will be like the gift that keeps on giving when she does Prime Minister's questions. Because
See, I like that.
I'm gonna sound awful now, but she is as thick as custard, and it is to her. To me, this is the exact problem that the Labour Party has. And this is pure identity politics. The only reason she's anywhere near that top table is because she was 16, she left school pregnant, she didn't have any proper exam results. They think she's this poster girl for normal working class people, but actually she's exactly the thing that you want to be teaching your children not to be. You don't really want to teach your children that you can rise to the top by getting pregnant at 15 and having a child and leaving school with no exams. You don't want to be setting that as any kind of example to anybody. It's brilliant that she's risen to the top. Wonderful. But she's risen to the top because of what she's done, rather than who she is, rather than what she's done. Because why on earth, or how on earth they expect her to cope at Prime Minister's questions, God alone knows.
Right, so I'm a girl's girl. I don't believe in taking down a girl for the circumstances. She obviously, something happened when she was 16. She, whatever the circumstances, she then became a very young mum. I like her story. I'm not one for identity politics, but I think it isn't. I completely disagree with you, but I'm trying to phrase it in a way that you're not going to tear me down. I think that she is an example of, if you have the right work ethic, you can achieve something even if you've made a mistake. So, I don't like using the word mistake because obviously a child isn't, but it was one of those judgments that would have definitely affected her future. I think I like her. And I like her story, and I don't think it is all necessarily about identity politics with her.
Well, Sam, I like her. I like her story. I admire anybody that's done what she's done and got herself a job after being in that situation. And I think she went back and did some retraining of. I think she got a maths in English or whatever. I mean, utmost respect.
Yeah.
The thing I don't have is that's the only reason she's at the top table, and that's the only reason she's been at the top table of Labour politics for the last however many years. She's got no talent as far as politics is concerned.
It didn't make sense for her to be education, that's for sure. It didn't make sense.
Yeah, and this is what I'm getting at. Her personally, nothing against it. I've got every admiration for people that come from a bad background, bad beginnings. Okay, might be a mistake, whatever, however you want to phrase it, and has made something of themselves. She's got up, she's got off her haunches, she's got herself some work, she's got some training. Brilliant, absolutely wonderful. But but that's the reason why she was given a job in the shadow cabinet a few years ago, and that's the reason why she's the deputy leader now, rather than any talent that she actually has. She's been involved now in frontline politics for the last 3.5 years. I can't think of a speech she's made I can't think of anything she's done or said that I think, cool, that was quite good. She's very good. She's your typical Labour student protest movement politician, where she will brilliant at arguing, brilliant at protesting, think Jack Abbott, brilliant at saying things are wrong, attacking things that are wrong. Almost, I can't ever think, it's very easy to attack a policy. It's far more difficult. We say this against people on social media all the while. If you're going to attack a policy, come up with a viable alternative. I can't think of anything interesting she's ever come up with. And I know it was a decision that was voted for, but I just don't think it's a good decision. And had she not have had the story she had, then I don't think she'd be in the position that she is in now, which I think is then wrong, because I think she's been promoted above other people because of her identity, and it will look good to have. It's tokenism, I believe. I'm trying to be nice. I'm being nice. I mean, I've got a problem with her background, Sam. I meet people like this all the while. But that doesn't mean that they should be promoted. You take it. We both work. I wouldn't like it if somebody in my office got promoted above me just because of their background, or me got promoted above somebody else because I come from a broken home or whatever. What's the point? Oh, there's nothing. That's not what politics should be about.
No, but also, when it comes to politics, we know that it does take a certain type of person, a strong person, to step up to the plate. She put herself above the parapet, and she put herself out there, and she was accepted amongst her own. I like her. You're right with what you say. She's different to Jess Phillips because you very much know what Jess Phillips is about. They've kind of got, I guess, a similar sort of just an average person vibe about them, but Jess is probably more vocal. It doesn't necessarily mean that she's not going to be good at the job. They might see a quality in her that we just haven't seen yet. So I'm going to reserve judgment. I'm not going to.
It's not as though it's not as though she's new to this. Well, I mean, she's been in frontline politics for 3.5 years. You're not going to see anything new from Angela Rayner now that you haven't seen in the last 3.5 years. I don't think anything there exists. But certainly, I haven't got a problem with her being the number 2. But I've always found this strange with all leadership, Labour leadership elections, and this is I've seen a few of them. Why anybody would put themselves forward to be number 2? Because they have an election to be deputy leader and they have an election to be leader, and you think to yourself, all those with a bit of ambition put themselves forward to be leader, and you're sitting there at home. And it just seems strange to me. I feel as though I've managed people before. I lead the group that I'm doing now. I'd like to lead people. I just can't imagine sitting in a room when you're thinking about your future, your own future in politics, and sitting there thinking, I don't really want to be leader, but I'd like to be deputy. And
it's the equivalent of being a sous chef, isn't it? You don't necessarily want to be. It's that support thing. I think it's also testing the water, I guess. Quite not quite having the but still putting yourself out there. That's why.
Yeah, but again, then, so you take Angela Rayner. I mean, she's got as much political experience as Rebecca Long Bailey. In fact, they shared a flat. That must have been a barrel of laughs, that flat, I tell you. Jesus, I'm not. No, this is for another episode because I could get myself into so much trouble there.
Yeah. I might have to edit.
But one put themselves forward to be a leader, one put themselves forward to be deputy leader, and my personal opinion is, if you just come. If she'd just come into frontline politics, if she'd only got a little bit of experience, I could understand it. But why anybody with 3.5 years of being a shadow minister then decides that they're only good enough to be the deputy? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, well,
there's different personalities. Maybe most other people listening to this would think that it makes sense, but I suppose I always presume that people want to be the leader or be led. I've always said there's two types of people. There's the shepherd and his flock. Some people want to be led. Some people want to be leader. I don't know anybody that wants to be. I'll be second in command, please.
Yeah, but
it seems strange to me.
I'm thinking, say it was there's strong personalities. You obviously know who's going to put themselves forward for leader, and then you're just thinking, well, maybe I'm not, I don't know, as popular, as appreciated for my strength as some of the big players like Keir. So I will get my exposure that I need as deputy, do a good job with the aspiration of, maybe next time round, because you've got to look at who is competing. So if there was the case where it was me and you part of something right now, I probably wouldn't.
Be careful.
I would in the future. I probably wouldn't go for leader. In that circumstance, because you've probably got a bigger profile than me. You're not as popular as I am, but you've got more experience, more knowledge. That kind
Popularity doesn't cut it, Sam.
Exactly. So it wouldn't be that it would be a lack of ambition. It would be, okay, at this particular time it's the right decision for me. And I think
I agree with that. I agree with your sentiment there, and that's what I could understand that for somebody that didn't come for 3.5 years of being in the shadow cabinet. She's had a lot of exposure. And then the next one, after Angela Rayner, is Annalise Dodds, who we haven't even mentioned at all, and is now the shadow chancellor. And I must admit, she's a bit of an enigma to me, because I know nothing about her politics. It's very difficult to find out much about her politics either.
Yeah, exactly.
I think she's worked under McDonnell ever since McDonnell was chancellor, shadow chancellor. So I have to presume she's probably got left leanings. She's another one that, in my opinion, has never had a proper job. She and this is what I mean about Labour. They don't do themselves any favours on how they think they're going to win back the working class by having Keir Starmer as their leader. Sir Keir Starmer as their leader. Annalise Dodds, she went to Oxford. She then went to the University of Edinburgh to do a bachelor's degree. Then she went to the London School of Economics to do a master's degree. And then all of a sudden she was lecturing in something at some university. And then she was an MEP. And then she was another one, never had a proper job. No real experience of what I class as the real world. And totally detached from the majority of what they'd class as their fan base. When you look at her Wikipedia page, you could think she looks more like a conservative politician. Look at some of the things she's done.
Yeah.
And, it sounds strange from a conservative saying about these people from these backgrounds, because they're the people that usually succeed for conservatives. But Labour just haven't got the message that they need to promote more from the working classes and more normal people, rather than people that seem to have been come from one certain section of society. And they really do seem to want to turn themselves into this metropolitan elite, which a lot of the press are seeming to portray them as, and they're doing nothing to make us think any different.
But playing devil's advocate here, when it comes to someone like the Chancellor, or future Chancellor, because shadow now, her background is exactly what I would expect to see. I wouldn't want someone in that role who I want someone to be very educated and to be part of the establishment as such when it comes to making decisions about money. I don't want someone who necessarily has the empathy and the compassion and everything else that I have, because I know, and I'm a little bit when it comes to money. Yeah. I know that if I was to win £1 million tomorrow, I probably wouldn't have a lot of it left, because I'm one of those people.
You'd give £950,000 away and then realise you've got no money to spend on yourself.
Exactly. And so I wouldn't be suited to be a chancellor. I'd love
You'd
to
be
be
the worst. You'd be the worst chance. You'd be the worst chance.
Exactly.
You'd buy everything that we needed. We'd have lots of PPE, I can guarantee. Then all of a sudden, we'd run out of money, and it'll be there, and there won't be enough money in the bank to pay the wages of the yeah.
Exactly.
No,
So you're not gonna. So for that choice, but then, like you say, I'm seeing it from a conservative point of view. I
get where you're coming from.
I'd want as a chancellor.
But she hasn't. No, I get where you're coming from. But the intelligence level, yes, but she's got no experience of being in business. She's got no experience of it, of what I class as real world finance. She's worked as a lecturer in a university. She knows, her background isn't finance. She hasn't been in banking. She hasn't worked in. Okay, so she's got a lot of experience from obviously working in that, in the shadow team with John McDonnell. But again, it's somebody that doesn't seem to have the real world experience and is just cut off from the rest. Now, they're the kind of things you expect from conservative politicians, and people have expected from conservative politicians, but it comes to something when we've probably got more working class people from a normal background in our cabinet and junior ministers as a whole than they have in theirs. And that's not something to shout about or something, because again, it goes to the identity politics, which neither of us like, but it shows you that Keir Starmer hasn't learned the lessons. He hasn't learned any lessons. You're not going to repair, I hate this term, but repair that red wall that they keep talking about by putting in people like this into his shadow team. That's not what it's about. If you were going to have Keir Starmer as leader, which is the metropolitan elite, as people say, even though he comes from a working class background, I believe. But if you're going to have him, he needs to have some more normal people in his team, and I don't think he's got enough of them.
Or is this just proving, so bear with me on this thought, because I've just thought it, is this proving that the Conservative way is the right way, full stop? So no matter how much you dress up your own politics and say, I'm Labour, I'm Lib Dem, or this is what I do, fundamentally, when it comes to people who are supposed to be running the country, they should look like a Conservative cabinet, because some of this does scream quite conservative to me. And I think it may actually be what people don't want to admit that they want, but it is what they want. Like I say about the Chancellor, this is exactly the type of person on paper, I don't really know much about her to be honest, that I would expect to see. So the Conservative way, no matter what politics you are, is the right way to do it.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
That's a Tory Talks episode all of its own.
Well, yeah, but I'm just, this proves everything we need to know. Is you look at this and this screams a bit Blairite to me.
Well, but I suppose, and I've said this to you a number of times, and I apologise, okay, in advance, because it's not meant. Because I know you're going to think, well, this sounds a bit condescending or whatever. You haven't been interested in politics for that long to know that much pre-Corbyn. Would I be right in saying that?
Well, I don't want to ruin all my reputation, but let's not forget it was Blair
No, as in where you're really, really interested to the extent that you are now, where you know about the personalities and everything. You still had you had political interests before that, but a lot of when you've been really, really involved has coincided with the Corbyn days. So this is more like what a shadow cabinet is and looks like, and is a more return to normalcy. You've got some from the left, some from the centre, some from the middle, people from all parts of the party.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to, I suppose, because Corbyn was very much, if you're not from this side of the party, you're not coming in, your name's not down, you're not on the list. That becomes the new normal. This is just getting back to when I look at this shadow cabinet, and as I said at the beginning, it reminds me a lot of the type of people that people like William Hague and Duncan Smith were choosing. When you've been in opposition for a long time, it's difficult to choose. You don't have that many recognised politicians to choose from. But this is just a bit more normal and a bit more.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe he's just
what it should be like.
But that's what I'm saying. Maybe he's just realised that actually this is what it should look like. So we sat here for, I don't know, an hour, sort of like tearing it apart and saying this isn't a Labour as such, but maybe it's just because it's not the far left Labour that we're used to seeing for 10 years. Maybe this is just coming back to this kind of Blairite Labour that works and actually wins elections. So I'm looking at this, and I would say personalities, but I think this is a strong cabinet, shadow cabinet in terms of opposition for us.
It's certainly stronger than what it was. I look at it and I don't think it's a strong opposition to us. That's because I don't recognise a lot of the names because they haven't been given the exposure that perhaps they deserved under Corbyn. I do think it's a return to more normal politics, as it were, which may be good, may not be good. But I look at it, and I know you say return to the more Blair days, but if you look at Blair's first cabinet, okay, they were, a lot of these people weren't particularly well known then because, again, Labour had been in opposition for many, many years. They're well-known household names now, the likes of Jack Straw and John Prescott and people like that, but they weren't necessarily household names beforehand. They were normal, down-to-earth Labour people from Labour heartlands that had Labour at their core, and that people in Labour areas, parts of this red wall, would resonate with. I'm not too sure how many of those there are down that list of names now. There's an awful lot of first-class political honours degree type people from good universities down that list. And there's very few. I mean, I'll give you a name down there. I'll find him. He's on my list down here. So he is down here somewhere. He's Shadow for Employment Rights, Andy MacDonald. Yeah. Okay, Andy MacDonald is that type of normal, everyday Labour politician that resonates with people from the north. And again, this sounds a bit identity-ish, but it resonates with the right type of people that Labour needs to obviously be able to win back. And there's very few of those in that list. And I'm sorry, that list smacks to me of a list of people that will win handsomely in the likes of Liverpool and Bristol and Brighton and places like that. But I look at it and I think, do you really think those politicians are going to resonate in Leeds and Bradford and Durham, where you need to be resonating? And Ray for us, because long may it continue, because honestly, my closing thing on the whole list is that he's missed the point completely.
Which is your favourite phrase?
Yeah, but he has. He's missed the point completely. There might be some very talented people in there, but he's not appealing to the people he needs to appeal to. He's appealing to the people he wants to appeal to rather than the ones he needs to.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what is going to come. So briefly, you wanted to...
Briefly,
very briefly.
Well,
what else is going on? I think it's quite...
No. I think it's quite interesting. So Corbyn has just disappeared exit stage left from British politics, hopefully along with the crazy brand of politics that he brought with him that did bring a lot of divisiveness and nastiness into politics that we hadn't had for quite some time. And I don't think it's any coincidence at all that your main man, Bernie Sanders, has done exactly the same in the States. Here he was, so a man with very, very similar politics to Jeremy Corbyn, somebody who apparently was extremely popular and was going to romp home with the Democratic nomination and had swathes of young people getting involved that were never involved before. And if you read any of the media in America, you would think he walked on water and he parted the waves. Just exactly. I mean, I used to call Jeremy Corbyn Saint Jeremy of Islington on social media, simply because of that. And it's the same thing. Bernie Sanders has now pulled out of the American presidential race because he hasn't been winning the popular vote. And I think hopefully this may consign the far left of politics to the dustbin for another 30 or 40 years until it rears its head again. I don't think it's any coincidence that both things have happened in a very similar timescale.
Well, reading up about it, because I don't know a lot about American politics, I've got to be honest, and I feel a bit guilty for it because I should know. But it seemed to be that the coronavirus and the lack of because they do that weird thing, don't they? And well, it's weird to us, but they sort of go into these big crowds of people and they give these roaring speeches. It's very a cult of personality, isn't it? It's a celebrity, and that's probably how Trump kind of won people over. And they've not been able to do that because of Corona. So they've not been able to do this big roaring roar. Let's get everyone up, and they've been doing some type of events which hasn't seen any support. And so I think he's, by the sounds of it, and again, I don't know enough about it, he's kind of given up the ghost and realised that he's not going to have enough support against Trump. And as
he's not against Trump, so I mean, he's going for the Democratic nomination, and I suppose it's a bit like the UK difference. There are areas of the UK where Jeremy Corbyn's brand of politics goes down very well. Brighton, Bristol, those kinds of places. Some areas of London, okay, but they don't in the majority of the country. There are areas where Bernie Sanders is treated like a god, in certain places of California, in places like that. But America isn't made up of those places. America is more of your your Idaho and your Montana and your deep Midwest type places than it is anything else. And I suppose there's this another thing where people that use social media really this is the wake up that social media isn't the world. If you believe social media, you'd think that Sanders was going to win the Democratic nomination and he was going to beat Trump 3 votes to 1 in November, and that would be the end of Trump.
Yeah.
In the same way that Remain were going to win the referendum and Jeremy Corbyn walks on water. Social media is not a reflection of real life, and I think what it goes to show you is that the far left of politics are very good and have been very good at manipulating social media to make the population think that they're more popular than what they really are. I think there's no appetite for far left politics anywhere, certainly in the UK or the US, and long may it continue.
So what is it now, Biden versus Trump?
Well, it's not Biden yet. I mean, I don't think anybody can beat Biden. It's a very strange way they do it. That basically they go into a state, and each state has a certain number of people that it nominates to this convention where they all actually physically go and vote. And if somebody wins in that state, they win all of those votes. And I think it's now impossible for anybody else to beat Joe Biden, who, by the time if he wins, by the time he would become president, would be 79, which means that by his 4-year term, by the end of it, he would be 83. And I think that tells you the dearth of decent people in the left of American politics. If all they can choose, I mean, because let's face it, Bernie Sanders was somebody that was over retirement age anyway. And this is not me being ageist, but they have a major problem in American politics that you need deep pockets to be able to survive, which is why no credible people often take part in it.
But then Trump is 73. I just looked it up. Trump is 73 himself.
Well, yeah. So if he won in November for his second term, when he finished his second term, he'd still be younger than what Joe Biden is now.
Yeah, true.
So it'd be 77 by the time he finished. Joe Biden's 78 already, and he'll be 79 before November. So yeah, that's ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous that Trump was considered the youngster in the race, and he's going to be in his 73. You don't see young people involved in American politics.
But what I find interesting is our media seems to harp on quite a lot about at the moment with like who's in charge. If the prime minister is ill, then who's in charge and all this. And we don't have a written constitution, and so we can be quite fluid. So this year it wasn't the time for elections. Boom, we're just going to delay it for a year, and we have that flexibility because our constitution, like our way of politics, is very different to America. And I just thought it was really crazy that they're still continuing with this during a crisis, but that's because they have to. And so there's a massive push to try and go towards an American way of doing our politics, which I don't think would work anyway because of our history. But I think in crises like Corona and going back to sort of like our situation right now, is that they don't have the flexibility we have. I don't want to see our politics changing and becoming an American style from what I know of the American style anyway. And I think something like, this lockdown and COVID and everything else has proved that our fluidity, that's a word, is helping in this kind of in this kind of situation. I cannot believe that they have to go through this right now and they can't just delay it. It's bonkers to me that they have to go through this right now.
Well, not really. I mean, if this was this time last year, Sam, they'd be saying the same about us going through an election. If we had a general election planned for June now, and it was planned last year for June, it was the end of the Fixed Term Parliament Act, what do you think we'd be doing now? How do you think we'd be around it?
I think
there is no set constitution. Well, there is no set constitution, so we wouldn't be able to delay it because Parliament would only be allowed to sit for 5 years. So we wouldn't have a backup. I mean, I get where you're coming from. There are definitely plus points about not having a constitution and plus points but there are plus points in having a constitution. But ours and America's politics are just so wildly different that they're not even on the same page to speak about. And long may that continue.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Long may that continue. So, what have you got planned for today?
I'm doing more gardening. I've spent a bit of time in the garden, and I've got to. I dropped some shopping at my mum's yesterday, and she does live just around the corner from me, so I do the dropping the shopping. I do her shopping for her, and I didn't drop round her Easter bunch of flowers yesterday, so I will leave them at her front gate in about 15 minutes' time.
Oh, that's cute. See?
And and then I might have to go and console myself by the fact that I've got no Easter eggs in the house.
My next door neighbour gave my kids Easter eggs, and I thought that was nice. So to say thank you, I pulled the weeds up from my front garden.
Yeah, I saw you put that. I'm not too sure how it's a thank you to them, you pulling your weeds up, but there you go.
They don't have to see it, you see.
You're so gracious. You're so gracious.
Right, well, as always, it's been a pleasure, and I will see you next week if I've survived another week of lockdown.
Enjoy the rest of your Easter Sunday. Do well in isolation.
Yeah, thanks. Happy Easter.
See ya.
Bye.
Happy Easter. Bye.